Warren Blackwood. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And so do we all. Wow.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure it's burning your ears as well. And poor member for Roe. Oh my goodness. How you put up with it, I just don't know. But there we are. Anyway.
All right. So thank you, Deputy Speaker. Last year, when I delivered my first budget reply speech, I said that Warren Blackwood had been overlooked, and I thought it can't get any worse. But how wrong was I? It was like the Labor government said, "Hold my beer and watch this," because this is where we're at. I've spent the last 12 months in this Parliament. I've sat through estimates, asked questions on notice, raised issues in both chambers, and met with ministers and their departments. I've spoken at community meetings across the electorate, from Nannup to Denmark, from Boyup Brook to Margaret River. So, Deputy Speaker, I approach this second budget reply with considerably more confidence and considerably more concern. Because here we are again. A couple of quotes from Premier Roger Cook, the election promises document for Bunbury, Vass and Warren Blackwood in February 2025. WA's Labor vision for regional WA will deliver for all West Australians across the length and breadth of our state. And the Treasurer in the 2026-2027 budget overview said, responding to the needs of our community today. I wanted to believe both of those things, so I did what a local member and everyone that was in this Parliament did, and we read through the budget. Budget paper 1, 2, both volumes, budget paper 3, the overview, the agency works program. Now, I'm not looking for political ammunition. I was looking for the names of our towns. Warren Blackwood's major towns, invisible in this budget. Denmark, not a single mention across all budget papers, not one line. It's just about 15 k's out, so it's close. It's in the Shire. Margaret River, not a single mention across all budget papers, not one line. Bridgetown, not a single mention, 0. Boyup Brook, not a single mention, 0. Nannup, not a single mention, 0. Pemberton, not a single mention, 0. And Northcliffe, not a single mention, 0. Can't find them? Feel free to chime in when you find them, member for Southern River. Manjimup appears 4 times, once for maintenance of an education office building, and Walpole appeals twice for a fence line and airstrip. The only town that gets any meaningful budget recognition is Coama, and that's solely because of the primary school upgrade, an election commitment made before polling day. Denmark is one of WA's fastest growing regional communities, with a population of around 6,000 that swells significantly over summer. Margaret River welcomes over 1 million visitors a year, and its local population has more than doubled since 2001. Bridgetown is the commercial heart of the Blackwood Valley, Boyup Brook and Nannup, Pemberton and Northcliffe. Communities that rely on this government to invest in roads, hospitals and schools and services, but all of them being left out of this year's budget. Deputy Speaker, I want to take this moment to establish something the public record should reflect. Warren Blackwood was held by Labor for the 4 years before the last election. Labor knew this community. They knew the Margaret River population had more than doubled since 2001. They knew the high school was running at nearly double capacity. They knew the hospital had 12 beds for a rapidly growing town, and they knew the roads were degrading. They went there, held community meetings, and they spoke about advocacy and representation, and they published this in the lead up to the 2025 Perry and Cook's WA Labor Election Promises document. Our vision for Bunbury, Vass and Warren Blackwood is about building on our success and preparing for future. Let us look at what the vision contained for Warren Blackwood specifically. A car park at the Denmark Primary School, $400,000. A fire station at Margaret River, $5 million. A park redevelopment in Manjimup, $1.25 million. Those were the headline commitments. Modest items for a region growing at this rate, held by their own party for 4 years. And now, in this first budget delivered after that election, most of these commitments do not appear as named line items. I looked at the Hansard record. Across the 4 years of the Labor government's last term, the name Warren Blackwood was mentioned 175 times in the Legislative Assembly. That's 175 times in 4 years. In the 14 months since the election, it has been mentioned 152 times. This is not a criticism of any individual, it is a measure of how much this electorate still needs to be spoken about and how much ground there is still to make up. The point is not the count, the point is what sits behind it. Every time I say Warren Blackwood in this chamber, it is because something needs to be said. The hospital, the school, the road, the refuge, the aged care facility, the forest community, the same issues, session after session, because the same needs have not been met. I raise this not to score points, but because the people of Warren Blackwood deserve to understand the pattern. The electorate was promised things. Those promises were not kept, and now the first budget following the election contains nothing new named for our major communities. The government needs to account for that. Deputy Speaker, I want to be direct about what I'm asking for. Not more than our fair share, not extras, not luxuries, a standard 3 words: named, funded and delivered. Named means the town is in the budget papers, not in a press release. The actual name on the place so that the people who live there can find it. Funded means there is a dollar figure against it, not a heading, not subject to further planning, an amount attached to a specific project. Delivered means there is a date, not in the forward estimates, a date people can hold the government to account. That is the minimum, and that is the budget. And this budget fails that test for this electorate in nearly every area that matters. So let me go through them. The family and domestic violence refuge. There's none in our electorate. Deputy Speaker, this is the issue I've raised most consistently since arriving in the Parliament, and the issue that concerns me the most about this budget. There is not a single family and domestic violence refuge anywhere in Warren Blackwood electorate. Not in Denmark, not in Margaret River, not in Manjimup, Nannup, Boyatbrook, nowhere. A woman fleeing violence in Manjimup sits roughly 2 hours from the nearest refuge in Bunbury and over 2.5 hours from Albany. There is no closer option. These are the realities of living in a regional electorate with no local refuge and no local safe house. If she has children, if she has no car, if she is injured, if it is the middle of the night, she is there on her own. The government invested an additional $106 million in family and domestic violence in this budget. The total since 2017 is $818 million. I acknowledge both of these things, but not one capital line, not one operational line, not one planning line places a single crisis bed inside Warren Blackwood. The budget funds new refuges in Albany, Bunbury, Newman and Peel, and $18.1 million for a new refuge in Innaloo. One suburb in metropolitan Perth, one suburb more than this entire electorate has received in named FDV capital investment across all the years that this government has been in office. Now, I'm not saying that Innaloo does not need it, but I am saying a woman in Manjimup does. The absence of a local refuge does not just affect the women who need one. It affects the police officers called to the same address multiple times because there is no safe exit point. So I'm formally calling on the government to put funding up for a family and domestic violence refuge in the Warren Blackwood electorate. I want it named, funded and delivered. And that means one line item, a location, a dollar figure and an opening date. And that line item does not exist in this year's budget. I want to talk about the Margaret River Hospital. The Treasurer announced a $9.1 billion boost to health. Regional hospitals named in this budget include Bunbury, Albany, Tom Price, Meekatharra, Geraldton and Laverton. I want to name the one that is not on that list. Margaret River Hospital has 12 beds. 12 beds for a town whose population has been more than doubled since 2001. And that welcomes over 1 million visitors a year. WA Country Health Service submitted redevelopment plans to Treasury in 2023. That's 3 years ago. No funding, no planning allocation, nothing in this budget. When the hospital cannot cope, patients travel. Some have to drive up to 2 hours to get to Bunbury. Some to go to Perth. Appointments are missed. Conditions that should have been caught early present as emergencies. For tourists who visit in their hundreds of thousands, a medical event in town with no hospital capacity can turn a holiday into a crisis. Manjimup Hospital still has no CT scanner. I raised this in estimates last year. and I'm raising it again today. Patients in Manjimup who need a CT scan travel a 3-hour round trip to Bunbury. But the impact goes beyond the patient. It is often the volunteer ambulance crew that makes that trip. These are the community volunteers, farmers, business owners, retirees, giving their time because there is no other option. Every unnecessary long-distance transfer adds hours on volunteers and wear and tear on the equipment. And there is no allocation in the budget for a CT scanner at Manjimup Hospital. One machine, that's all we're asking for. And the Bridgetown Hospital Emergency Department roof is leaking. Funding was previously promised for re-roofing and it is not visible as a specific line item in this budget. And we'll be seeking answers and estimates on where that commitment now sits. Northcliffe Nursing Post and Pemberton Hospital continue to need maintenance, and that has been raised with the department and still not resolved. I want to acknowledge what has been delivered. Quarramup Primary School receives $11.9 million for a new classroom block. That was an election commitment and it has been funded, and I welcome it. That is exactly what named, funded, delivered looks like. And I name it here because the contrast with everything else makes the failures even sharper, and I look forward to its delivery. The Margaret River Senior High School Stage 2. This school was built for approximately 650 students. It is currently supporting over 1,200. Teachers and students have been working in overcrowded conditions while Stage 2 of the expansion has been deferred year after year after year. Transportable classrooms brought in as a temporary measure and now permanent infrastructure. There is no funding for Stage 2 in this budget, no planning line, no timeline, nothing. The consequences of running a school at nearly double its capacity are not just logistical. Teachers managing classrooms of 35 or more students cannot give the individual attention that helps students succeed. Teacher retention suffers, experienced staff move to schools with better conditions. Families considering a move to Margaret River look at the school situation and some choose not to come. A community that cannot provide adequate schooling struggles to attract the workers it needs. The school crisis and the housing crisis and the workforce crisis are all connected, and the budget does nothing about any of them. The budget allocates $219 million to school maintenance statewide, and I support that, but there is not a single name maintenance commitment to a Warren Blackwood school in the budget. At Denmark Senior High School, there are reports of mould in classrooms and staff areas. Mould is not a cosmetic issue. It is a health issue for students and teachers who spend their days in those spaces. At Greenbushes Primary School, ageing buildings have been raised with the department, yet nothing allocated. Yes, it was good. Why was that? Why was that? Yeah. And it's very welcomed. At Brook District High School, raised last year and raised again now, the toilet blocks are run down. The showers have no doors and there is no hot water. That is not acceptable in any school in Western Australia in 2026.
Margaret River High School member for Warren Blackwood, any funding in there?
No, I couldn't find any. Yeah. It's been kicked down the road.
For Southern River?
If 200...
Page 0.
I'll continue, thank you. We'll have a beer and discuss in length. If $219 million is going to school maintenance statewide, I want to know which Warren Blackwood schools are on the list.
Yes.
And if there is none, why not? What have we done? Margaret River Independent School is a highway hazard. I also need to raise a specific and serious road safety issue that has been brought to my attention. Margaret River Independent School sits on a road with a 110km speed hour limit. There's no pull-off lane. It's an accident waiting to happen. This has been raised with the relevant agencies. There is nothing in this budget to address it. I'm calling on the Minister for Education and the Minister for Transport to treat this as a safety priority, not a planning matter. It is a straightforward solution if the government chooses to fund it. And other outstanding items, the Denmark Primary School car park upgrade, the Bridgetown High School upgrade still outstanding. And WA's road toll remains a serious concern. The budget commits $113.5 million to Main Road's statewide maintenance program. And that sounds substantial, but none of this is named on roads our communities drive on every day. The southwest highway between Manjimup and Walpole has narrow lanes, soft shoulders and limited overtaking. It has been repeatedly identified as one of WA's most dangerous roads, and yet it is still not in the budget. On the Manjimup Bridgetown corridor, a major freight and tourist route with nowhere to overtake safely, nothing in this year either. The Bustle Highway through Kuaramup carries heavy traffic and has inadequate pedestrian infrastructure, an ongoing concern raised repeatedly by the community and by the former member for Vass as well when it was in her electorate. Poor roads carry costs that do not appear in a budget, but are paid for by the communities every day. When a freight truck has to slow to a crawl because there is no overtaking lane, that adds time and fuel costs to every agricultural delivery. And an overtaking lane between Bridgetown and Manjimup is long overdue. When a tourist is involved in an accident on the Southwestern Highway, it damages the region's reputation as a visitor destination. And when an ambulance is trying to reach an emergency on a road with soft shoulders and no overtaking, the crew faces risks that simply should not exist. Deputy Speaker, the government's 7 cities vision is being promoted as a bold plan to develop vibrant regional centres across West Australia. And I understand the ambition, but not one of those 7 cities is in Warren Blackwood. In Warren Blackwood, there is limited public transport. If you're an elderly resident in Nannup who needs to see a specialist in Bunbury, you drive, or someone drives you, or you simply just go without. If you're a family in Northcliffe and your car breaks down on the day of a hospital appointment, you cancel. The government is investing in regional hubs and calling it access, but access to a hub that requires a car and 2 hours of driving is not access for everyone. It is access for those who are healthy enough, mobile enough and resourced enough to get there. Warren Blackwood communities need local services, local hospitals. Can I have a short extension, please?
Extension granted.
Local refuges, local aged care, local government offices, not a hub 2 hours away with no means of getting there. The government says it is delivering almost 20,000 new homes for regional WA. I looked at the regional breakdown of the budget overview. The Pilbara gets 462 new grow homes. The Goldfields gets 195. The Midwest and Gascoyne get 120. The Kimberley gets 179. The Great Southern 61. The Wheatbelt gets 50. The Southwest gets 24. 24 homes for the entire Southwest region. That is not a housing policy for this part of the state. That sounds like a rounding error. And not one of those 24 homes is named for Denmark, Margaret River or Manjimup, communities where the housing shortage is directly stopping us from recruiting teachers, nurses and police officers. The shortage of housing has direct consequences for every other service in this electorate. When there is no housing for a nurse at Margaret River Hospital, the remaining nurses carry heavier workloads, and eventually some of them leave too. When a newly appointed teacher cannot find accommodation in Margaret River, the school goes another term without them. Housing is not a standalone problem. It is the mechanism by which every other service failure is made worse. Growth needs infrastructure. This is not complicated, it is just true. Deputy Speaker, I'm the Shadow Minister for Forestry, and that means I pay particular attention to what the budget says about the timber industry, about conservation, management, and about the communities that depend on both. And what this budget says is very little. The native forest harvesting transition, which the government accelerated to January 2024, continues to reshape communities across the electorate. Pemberton, Manjimup, Northcliffe, these are the towns that built their identity around the timber industry over generations. The transition was managed on a timeline set in Perth, announced without adequate transition support in place, and communities were left to absorb the consequences. What I can say is this: the budget papers do not name Pemberton, they do not name Northcliffe, and they do not name Manjimup's timber-dependent community in any meaningful way. They are structurally maintenance line items attached to Manjimup Education Office, but that is administration, not investment in a community doing it hard through economic transition. The plantation softwood industry continues to operate, but the significant capital investment needed to diversify the downstream processing sector, like furniture, engineered timber products, value-adding manufacturing is not visible in this budget. The gap is a missed opportunity. This electorate has the forests, the skilled workforce and the industry knowledge to build a sustainable timber future. What it does not have is a state government willing to name it, fund it and deliver it. Deputy Speaker, I'm also the Shadow Minister for Aged Care, and I want to speak specifically to what this budget does and does not do for aged care in regional WA. The Treasurer's speech references a $104 million interest-free loan package to support the aged care sector. She described it as supporting aged care providers to maintain and upgrade their facilities. That figure sounds substantial, but the details matter. The Peel and Rockingham Kwinana health campuses will receive dedicated aged care capital investment. That is welcome, but in the budget papers I'm looking for the equivalent for the South West, for the small regional providers who have been waiting years for capital support to keep ageing facilities operational. More than 300 patients across regional WA are currently waiting for aged care placements because facilities in their communities are operating at capacity or beyond it. Over 300 people. That figure comes from the Treasurer's own speech. And here is what I know from my electorate. The gap between what aged care facilities in regional WA receive in Commonwealth funding and what it actually costs to care for a person in a regional setting is significant. Providers have told me it is approximately $119 per resident per day across a 100-bed facility. That is over $4 million a year that providers must find from somewhere else, from donations, from dipping into reserves, from deferred maintenance, from stretched staffing. Now, in February this year, the aged care sector was invited to lodge applications for a portion of that $104 million loan facility. Applications were submitted. The sector responded. Providers in regional WA, including providers in or near this electorate, put time and effort into those applications. Since then, nothing. No communication, no acknowledgement, no timeline, no outcomes, nothing. Sector representatives have told me that they do not know what is happening. They do not know if their applications are being assessed, if the process has changed, or if the program has been quietly shelved. The loans were oversubscribed, which means the need is real, but the silence from the government since February is not acceptable. Regional aged care providers cannot plan without certainty. When you do not know whether a capital project is funded, you cannot sign a contract, you cannot engage a builder, you cannot commit to staff, and while the government keeps providers waiting, residents in regional communities keep waiting for the places that do not exist. So what is the status of the February loan applications? When will the applicants be notified? And how many of the successful facilities will be in regional WA? Deputy Speaker, I want to be clear about what this speech has been. It's not been a complaint, it's been about an accounting. Warren Blackwood is one of the fastest growing regions in Western Australia. It is the food and wine bowl of Western Australia. Yeah. It carries a forestry heritage and a tourism economy that contributes to this state in ways that cannot be measured in royalties. It has communities, real communities, with hospitals, schools, aged care facilities and families that are doing the work of modern life and with the infrastructure that modern life requires. In this budget, the government has chosen not to name Denmark, not to name Margaret River, not to name Bridgetown, Boyup, Nannup, Pemberton or Northcliffe in any meaningful way, not to fund a family violence refuge, not to fund a CT scanner in Manjimup, not to fund school upgrades, not to fund housing, not to fund a pull-off lane in a 110km/h road that with hundreds of families use to drop the children off at school every day. And then it has asked the people of Warren Blackwood to simply wait. The standard I hold this government to is not complicated. It is the same standard it claims to apply to itself. If an investment is real, name it, fund it, deliver it. Name the town, name the hospital, name the school, and name the refuge. Name the road. Fund it with a specific line item, a specific amount and a specific purpose. Deliver it on a timeline that residents can hold the government accountable to. Name, funded, delivered. Until then, I will continue to stand here and ask why Warren Blackwood is still waiting and we continually get left out. Thank you.
Nobody? Nobody?